In this episode, we take a step back from the noise. The postings, the interviews, the rinse and repeat of modern job hunting, and ask a deeper question. What if the way most people search for jobs no longer works? Over the past year, I've had hundreds of conversations with people in transition, students, newcomers, and senior executives alike. And time again, I've heard the same quiet frustration. I've done what they told me to do. I'm applying. I'm networking. I'm trying to sound strategic, but nothing is moving. The truth is, some people are still succeeding through the traditional approach, polished resumes, storytelling, and hoping to be picked from a pile. But if we're honest, their grip on success may be slipping. The market has changed. The expectations have changed. And hiring, more than ever, is driven by trust, familiarity, and presence. That's what this conversation is about. Together with Michael Hughes, North America's leading expert on networking, we explore how the transferable skills narrative so often falls flat, how shallow networking efforts sabotage even the most capable professionals, and how to adopt a company-first strategy that flips the dynamic entirely. This isn't a life hack, it's a strategic reset. You'll learn why the easy apply button rarely leads anywhere, how to position yourself before a job even exists, and what it means to become the candidate they already trust, long before the first interview. If you've been stuck, drifting, or feeling invisible, give yourself a space to take all this in. This is one of those conversations that could change how you see the game and how you choose to play it from here on. So let's begin. Welcome to today's episode of Retailing Conversations 2020s. This conversation is going to be challenging the way we think about job searching in a digital age. I'm recording this in April 2025, and it's a particularly interesting time. There's lots of challenges in the economy and the environment. We've had a change of US government, and that's caused some ripples with tariffs and trade wars and whatnot. We have our own government approaching a general election. We have a residual cost of living crisis. We have a lot of things going on. And as a result of the uncertainty that this is building into, we have people perhaps looking over their shoulders thinking, will I have a job here? Or they may already been placed into transition. So over the past year, I've had hundreds of networking conversations, and many of them circle back to the same frustration when it comes to job searching. Why isn't this working? For the last 6 months, I've been reflecting pretty much in real time with students, newcomers, and also senior executives on what's broken in the traditional job search model and what needs to change. What's clear is this: in an age where people hire people they trust, like, and feel comfortable around, we're still relying on outdated transactional approaches that just don't work anymore. To help me unpack this shift, I'm joined by somebody who's helped thousands unlock career success through human connection, Michael Hughes, North America's leading expert on networking, and also my former networking coach. So together we'll explore why the transferable skills pitch often fails, how to fix broken networking habits, and what a company-first strategy really looks like in action. So let's dive into this conversation that I hope brings clarity, practical tools, and a whole new perspective. So, Michael, I'm particularly interested, just to set the level as such, is what is networking? What is good networking? What does ineffectual networking really look like? And does it change between one-to-one conversations or one-to-many conversations, such as when we go out to open networking events where we're moving around and meeting perhaps some old friends and perhaps trying to bump into new people to strike up a conversation. So over to you, Michael.
Thanks, Larry. Glad to be here, and thanks for allowing me to be part of this. I'm really looking forward to it. When it comes to networking, just a little bit of background here is I've been relentlessly, some would say obsessively, researching networking as a business strategy and a professional competency for over 20 years now. And so I've looked at this from any number of different ways. And, it's interesting that you mentioned about networking as a job search strategy. And I believe today it's more important, necessary, and valuable to look at networking as a primary resource to allow job searchers to be able to get to where they need to go. And unfortunately, as you just mentioned, many of them don't understand it properly, don't do it right, and don't achieve the results they want. So let me unpack that just a little bit. And three quick pieces I'd share just for people to be able to better understand what's going on here. First of all, people think of networking as an activity. It's a conversation you have with someone. And the reality is it's a process. It really is. Networking is a relationship igniter and a relationship accelerator. Now before people stop and think for a second, let me ask you to go back and think about the 2 or 3 highest value relationships in your life right now. It could be someone you've known for a long time, someone you deeply respect, someone who's maybe mentored you. And those deep, meaningful relationships, did they happen overnight? If you and I could unpack those, go back into the sequence of events and where they started, is it true you met them somewhere? Maybe it was at a conference. Maybe it was when you went to work in their department. Maybe it was at a community event that you attended with them. And that initial conversation was the spark that allowed that relationship to move forward. And it took time. So it's a process that networking conversations ignite, but need to move forward. So networking is process driven. The second quick piece I would say is it's skill based. Now, many people say, Mike, I'm just not good at this. And the reality is, Gary, that's just not true. All of us are networking. We've been doing it since we were small children. We played in the sandbox with all your friends. You were networking. When you went to post-secondary and you went to that class with that person and you got to know them, you were networking. When you started that job, went into that new department, we do it formally and informally every single day. Now, the good news is we're all doing it. The bad news is many of us don't understand exactly how it works. So I try and tell people to better understand and accept that networking is the conversations that you have that ignite those relationships and move them forward. So networking is process driven, it's skill based, and the good news is we're already good at it. What gets in the way, especially in a job search environment, is we feel we're down here and everyone else is up here and we've got to go in and ask for something. And then the last little piece I would say is networking is holistic. We think of it in terms of a professional activity, but it transcends that. How many times has someone in your personal life had an impact on your professional career? How many times has someone in your professional career had an impact on your personal life? That's in essence the primary basis around networking, that it's process driven, it's skill based, and it's holistic. Now, when we do it, most of us do it unconsciously. We do it just as something that we've done. We don't appreciate or recognize the intricacies of the conversations we have. So you mentioned 2 different interaction pieces. One is one-on-one and one is in a group. And the reality is networking in a group is a little bit different than one-on-one. In a group, you need to adapt to the environment. You need to insert yourself into the conversation and get yourself going. In a one-on-one conversation, it's more an intimate interaction between 2 people that allows a relationship to move forward. That's in essence the primary purpose to getting a relationship moving forward and how networking contributes to that whole process.
That's an excellent introduction to the subject here. I would say my own experience of networking is when I go to open networking events, if we can see networking as a sort of scale of deepness, I'm very sort of butterfly. I'm talking to lots of people and having just a general chat because my intention is to talk to them more deeply afterwards, one-to-one, when I've got no distractions. It's just me and that person talking about whatever it might be. It could be their job search, it could be their future career, it could be my future. Where do I find work from it? I find that the difference, the dynamic for me is in a group, it's great, have fun, spark that initial friendships, for want of a better way of expressing it. But when you're going one-to-one, it is trying to get that deep, meaningful thing going on there, which can lead to doors being opened, both sides of the equation. So I'm going to start to describe where we seem to find ourselves and perhaps in some way, some of my own experiences of job searching when I first came to Canada, because I was trying to navigate, do I need to carry on doing what I was doing, which is, working independently, helping companies, typically in the retail supply chain, Or do I find a job? How do I do that? What is the core message I was told by a whole range of people in the job search industry, let's say? One of the things that I learned fairly quickly, and I actually became quite good at, to my detriment, I think, I joined a number of job searching clubs and whatnot, often on the other side of the town I live in. And the essence was a company is looking for a specific job when they have a gap. They've got a job title for it, they have a list of requirements. It's based in this company and it's based in this location. So to mirror that, I would be looking for a role, an industry, and a location, and hopefully the two match together. So role, I might be looking for certainly back, if I go back a long time, 10 plus years, I was looking for a CEO role in a third party logistics company based in the Greater Toronto area. I thought I was, cracking this in no time flat because most of the other people I was talking to were talking about the transferable skills. They did this over here, did that over there. And I had to, as a recipient of that information, try and work out what it is they were trying to communicate to me because it wasn't that clear. And I think that this is one of the vagaries of the area of or myths of transferable skills. Somehow that because we've done something in, let's say, an allied industry, manufacturing, it's going to be eminently transferable to retailing. All I have to do is tell a great story about it. So this whole area of transferable skills is fundamentally flawed. I hope that my argument here, helped by Michael's support, is for many people, it's what they're involved with, and this is how they've learned the job search. But when the employer goes to the market with a job requirement to fill a gap, they're actually looking for a high level specific industry knowledge, not retailing, but grocery retailing or large grocery retailing. They're looking for functional depth. So if they're not looking for somebody in supply chain, they're looking for somebody who can do transportation at this level or warehousing at this level or marketing at this level, and looking for contextual familiarity so that they need to be talking to people who can really understand them. At the end of the day, everything's about them, not about you as a candidate. The employer will always prefer ready now experience over generalized capabilities. And as we go through these challenging times ahead, I think that will become much more clear to people. So what often happens, and I've been guilty of it myself, certainly in my earlier stages of trying to break into Canada, I'd say, I'm looking for a specific role in a specific industry in a specific location, and, fix, job done. Or, and I've heard this several times, I'm looking for something in supply chain, which is an incredibly wide field, and it deserves much more of a boundary for anybody to take you seriously. This lack of specificity, or maybe being too specific about the role, the industry, and the location, can actually kill a conversation. And unfortunately, most people are too polite to respond and say, look, I can't help you. So what happens is, as adults, we've learned tools and techniques to kind of dodge around that point and say, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'll let you know. But basically, it shut down the conversation, and a networking attempt, which was ill-conceived, actually fizzles out. What tends to happen next is the person doing the networking, the candidate might say, networking just isn't working for me. This networking thing is just some kind of scam. I don't understand it. Where's the easy apply? Let me just make some more applications because this going direct to employers is hard work. This whole basis of me turning up with a job title, an industry, and a location is fundamentally flawed. It's not necessarily the networking was flawed, but how I approached the networking with this thing in the background. That's the thing that's been flawed.
Gary, I think you're absolutely bang on. I mean, the times of just showing up and bragging about or telling stories about everything that we've accomplished and anticipating that others, whether it's colleagues, whether it's recruiters, whether it's potential employers, are going to seize on that, it just doesn't work anymore. The word that comes to mind for me is relevance. We need to, as job applicants, become more relevant to people. The question is, how do you do that? The whole throw everything against the wall and see what sticks is fine. It's easy. It's convenient. It makes us feel busy. It's activity as opposed to productivity because everyone else is doing it. The issue is, and I found the key to success is seeking to become more relevant in the marketplace around markets, industries, companies, and even individuals, professionals that you want to connect with. That's my take on that.
You mentioned storytelling, and in that pursuit of relevance, whether or not we're conscious of doing that, but perhaps we will be from now on. But there is this practice of saying, look, I've done this over here, and we do some storytelling of how that might fit into what your requirements are over here, Mr. Employer. So stories can become quite embellished or vague, and the employer's sitting there going, I'm not quite getting this story here. I'm not sure how that relates to here, because I've got some real specific requirements. And there's a risk that no direct connection is made between the employer's needs and the candidate's contributions elsewhere. The other risk is the employer might actually be enchanted by your ability to tell stories. But when we get into, we move forward and maybe, have an offer, get started in the company, but there's a mismatch. You've told a story about something, the employers maybe told you a story about, oh, don't worry about all these detailed requirements. Actually, what we meant was, and the two things don't match. And this can happen for both sides. We can both be enchanted that this is a job we want, maybe, or this is a candidate I want, maybe. As an aside to this, when we think about perhaps if we go back to, say, 70s, 80s, 90s to an extent, that the employment contract or understanding was that you would join as a young person, and between what you did in the company and the employer's interest, they would try and mold your career, and you'd stay in the company for 20, 30, 40 years sometimes. It would be a joint effort to try and promote you and skill you to what they needed you to do over time. You deliver value over a long period of time. I think what happened, certainly for the companies that all went into 2000, still with that attitude, and there are one or two companies still around that, like Costco might be a great example of taking people in at entry level and hoping to develop their career, but they're very much an exception. What happened during the Great Recession? People were laid off in great droves, and suddenly, this is my thoughts, every time an employer issued a job to the market, they got inundated with applications, and they had no time to think about, oh, what we need to do is bring this person in and develop them. They just went very lean. They introduced, if they hadn't introduced by that stage, they introduced the applicant tracking system. They had no budget. They wanted people to come in and deliver immediate value. So you had to have an incredibly close match to requirements. Another thing that happened along the way was the 30, 60, 90-day plans, which I would argue as probation plans. I've never done one myself, frankly, but I've heard lots of people getting involved in this. And it's really a test from the employer of a candidate's understanding of the business. And it's to try and validate in some way your ability to deliver. And do you understand the requirements are from a job, and to hold you accountable. And sometimes I'm sure that there's been many candidates blindsided by quite generous probation periods, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, convince themselves, I'll make this work somehow. But they later get restructured or rationalized, which is really code for, you weren't really relevant to our needs. We're moving on without you. One of the things that I've noticed in my conversations with people who are active job searchers is they try and make a virtual, so they say, oh, look, I've worked in multiple industries. I've worked in many different countries. I've worked in different levels of organizations, from small to medium to large companies to multinationals. I've done M&A work, mergers and acquisitions. I've done rationalization work. I've done startups. I've been in high growth, hoping to show that level of adaptability and ability to develop their knowledge elsewhere and be successful elsewhere may be relevant to here. And often it doesn't actually hit the spot. but it is part of this idea of transferable skills that the whole job search industry seems to be fixated about. The reality is, generally speaking, people touch things lightly. They struggle to show relevance or depth in the areas that the employer is very keen on understanding, and they end up falling back on storytelling. So I think the job market is relatively, the formal jobs market, let's make a distinction there. You've got the informal, which perhaps we're going to explore later in this conversation. You've got the formal, so that's jobs that are going through recruiters or on job boards or just advertised on their company websites. I think that job market has been reduced to quite a transaction, and employers are looking for absolutely direct fit, literally bring you in and plug you into this thing, off you go, a plug and play solution. And few will take a chance on an unproven candidate. What happens is the employer then ends up running these multi-round recruitment processes because they're hoping, because the first tranche of people just like don't excite them somehow. They're not highly relevant. And they're hoping somehow in a 10-round interview process, that unicorn we're looking for that can just plug and play will just emerge. And basically they don't emerge, and the employer ends up having to compromise on their requirements and hope that a candidate they're finally selecting to do this kind of works out somehow.
Gary, the marketplace has changed. I mean, really, COVID just blew everything out of the water, changed everything by 180 degrees. From a corporate standpoint, people are struggling. They don't have time to wait and train. They want to find people who are a fit with what they need now. That's why it's so important when it comes to job search for professionals to be able to effectively communicate the value that they have, how it fits, and how they can be helpful to someone today. And that kind of turns the job search strategy on its head for a lot of people, because they're used to thinking in terms of, well, I'll just put out all these online applications, or I'll just start getting out there and just sharing all the stuff I do in the expectation that people will do that. It doesn't work like that anymore. You know that. I know that people participating in this program today need to appreciate the fact that it's necessary for them to become more proactive, to become more positive, and to become more effective in communicating what they can bring to the marketplace so that employers can see them as distinct, different, and dramatically able to help their organizations.
To the point you've just made, Michael, this sort of activity stuff, this activity phase that people go through, substituting, as you said earlier, activity for productivity. So I call it the easy apply button. On LinkedIn, sometimes the employer wants to make it very easy for people to not to have to deal with lots of paperwork. They go, oh, just put easy apply and you just put your resume up or send your LinkedIn profile in and they sort it out their end, which is great from a time saving point of view, but it's probably means that you're going to be in a very full cohort with practically zero chance of breaking through. But what really happens is that process ends up in endless multi-round processes because they're waiting for that unicorn to arrive. Lots of potential unpaid assignment work. So if you get into level 5 or 6, employers might say, well, here's an assignment. I need you to do it and come back and present that to me and my colleagues, say. So there's a lot of potential intellectual property you may be giving away there. Little to no feedback along the way. You just get another date, turn up this time, you're going to meet this person. If you go through the process or to the end or you drop off, you become second again, and you're just going through this process. It's a sort of rinse and repeat. The feeling that one gets is that, oh, there must be other people better than me at this. When people often fail to reflect and go, is the process itself broken? Because really, I should have got that job. What happened that stopped me from getting that job? They just internalize it as something that perhaps, they could have done better. They could have had a little bit more experience. They could have spoken French. They could have had a PMP qualification, whatever it is that they kind of internalize this on themselves. And candidates can feel stuck. They feel that they've just got to keep going. Somehow it'll work itself out. They often get ghosted. There's lots of the employer's too busy to talk to me. When should I follow up? Should I follow up at all? Should I just wait for serendipity to take over? And they become disillusioned. They internalize that failure, not realizing they're following a broken script and need a new one. Between me and Michael, we're going to talk about a slightly different approach to this, using some of the, let's say, description of networking to try and turn this thing on its head. I'm going to call this the company first networking strategy. I consider this to be very much a winning strategy in today's competitive job searching marketplace. This strategy is where you stop waiting to be picked and start creating opportunities, momentum, clarity, and real access to the kind of things that you really are going to be incredibly good at and incredibly valuable to employers. Most people don't know how to network. They default to the easy apply on LinkedIn and other aggregators. They keep saying, I'm looking for a specific role in a specific function. And most people who are approached, as I said earlier, faced with this demand, just shut down because they don't know how to help and end up suggesting, oh, I'll think about that. Sounds good. Sounds really interesting. And then they promptly move on. They've forgotten you already. You're not being even relevant to your networking contacts, let alone to a potential decision maker or employer. And I wonder why nothing really happens. So this plan, this scheme, this strategy kind of flips this whole networking dynamic on its head, but only when it's used right. So instead of saying, I'm looking for a specific role in a specific industry, or worse, I'm looking for just a specific role and saying, I've got these transferable skills, or telling stories around those, or I'm looking for a role in the supply chain industry or the marketing industry or the retailing industry, which are incredibly vague to grapple with. You offer something tangible and actionable. I'm researching these 4 or 5 companies right now. Do you know anybody there? Now, people feel that they might actually be able to help you with that. So what we need to do, and I've been suggesting this to many people over the last 6 months, and I've said normally pick 4 or 5 companies, but really it can be any number you like. And it's up to you how much energy you've got and want to apply to this exercise. But I'm going to say, for the purpose of this podcast, 4 or 5. You substitute it with whatever you like. But these 4 or 5 companies must drive you. They must genuinely excite you. They're ones that you'd love to work for, ones that you die to work for. These are non-negotiable. These are companies that really fill you with a great sense of urgency, of purpose, of motivation. But you need to dig into why they might inspire you. Could it be their values? Could it be their leadership or their leadership style? Could it be the product line? Could it be the mission they're on? Their impact? Could it be their strategic direction? Something's triggered you to feel so aligned with that organization from the get-go. You want to put them on your list. So you need to understand that why before you do anything else, because it has to emotionally anchor you so that when the research gets deep and the conversations start to pile on and you get a few kickbacks, you stay energized, you stay focused, and you stay engaged in the mission. Those companies, those 4 or 5 companies, they could be government organizations. I don't limit myself to thinking that I would never work for a government organization. Who knows? I could do. But you choose names that other people might recognize or just find engaging. I had a conversation with somebody recently. I'd actually done some initial research before the conversation. I pointed them in the right direction. And they had this one company. And you know what? This is exactly the conversation you want to encourage. They had this company's name and said, what's that company? What do they do? And if you do the next bit, you can fill their mind with what do they do. You can really engage in that conversation with them about what do they do, why it's on your list, and do they know anybody at that company? If you drop these names of these companies into a conversation, they should spark curiosity or recognition, or maybe both.
You're bang on here. I think this is something that very few professionals think about, because when it comes to the job search environment, they tend to think in terms of that they're on the outside looking in, and that's not really true. when it comes to networking, it's a peer-to-peer connection network. Many professionals think when they walk into a room full of corporate professionals that they're on the outside. They're the little guy down in the corner talking to all these big people. That's just not true. People go to networking events, and the simple fact you're there makes you a peer. So the conversations you have with them should be thought in terms of peer-to-peer conversations. Now, that takes some courage, but when you do that, what you do is you change the whole dynamic. See, you talked about earlier the conversation. A networking interaction is usually 30 seconds to 3 minutes. That's to connect with that person, start the conversation, get to know another a little bit, and ask that magic question is, what do you do, or what are you looking for? And it's our responsibility as job seekers to help make it easy for people to help us. And that's what you're talking about, is taking responsibility for the job search process and doing the research in order to help others know what we're looking for. Listen, people want to naturally help. That's who we are. And our job is to make it easy for them. Just saying, I'm looking for work in the supply chain, can you help, is not helpful. But telling that person, you know what, I'm looking for a job in supply chain management. I've been looking at Acme Manufacturing. I mean, that's a wonderful company. I've got an incredible background. I'm really looking to talk to somebody there. Would you happen to know anybody? All of a sudden, it changes the entire dynamic. That's one of the most simple yet most difficult things to do, because it takes confidence and it takes competence. And that's why your suggestion to do the research in advance, to what's that saying, drill baby drill, when it comes to that organization, to look at who they are, what they do, what motivates them, so you can talk in passionate terms about them, and that excites people and enthuses them and opens their heart and their minds to want to be helpful to you.
And let me just add on to that, because the most important thing you can do in a networking conversation, if you get into this kind of a conversation, I would encourage people following this path, they get into those conversations at the earliest opportunity, is to be memorable. Because remember what I said earlier on, that when you say, I want this role in that, people forget you in an instant. If you're saying that I'm really interested in the Acme manufacturing company, you've explained why and what they're doing from your own initial research, you're saying they're doing this and doing that and they're facing these kind of challenges and whatever, you're making a real great story for somebody to remember. I remember Gary, he's interested in the Acme manufacturing company. Oh, look, what's going across my desk? He might need to know about this. If I say I'm looking for a chief supply chain officer in a retail industry, nobody remembers. They've forgotten. Even if it lands on their desk the next day, they've forgotten me. Now, you mentioned an important point in this, and this is a detective work. So let's just put this in a bit of context. When I've done the occasional job search, I kind of spend half a day kind of going through on Google and just trying to work out what the heck's going on, read the job spec a bit more and try and get into the interview mode and go have the interview and kind of hope that I don't get any really technical questions that I should know about, because it's probably been a company that I've not had much involvement with, and I'm just doing a surface level research into it, enough to hopefully get me through there and maybe have a question or two in the any other questions section. But maybe they'll deal with that, in which case I've got nothing in the bread bin by the time that question comes up. This is the second step. So we've checked through the why, we've got the list assembled. Now we're going to actually verify those companies on that list should actually be on that list. You've checked your why, but what you're going to do is become the detective. You're going to do the research. So you use anything you can get hold of, LinkedIn, Media Analyst Report, Glassdoor, ChatGPT, search engines. Even if nothing is currently open in the company, you're not looking for a specific job at this stage. You're looking at what business challenges does the organization that's on the list is facing. You're trying to uncover what the big challenges they seem to have, what big projects are underway, and what's keeping their team up at night. These are big issues that you really need to get clarity on. So here's a 10-point checklist. I'm just going to read this out, but this isn't the end of the list. Keep going. If you can have a 20-point checklist, that's so much better. But look at recent company news and media appearances. Look at key executives and leadership shifts. Have they brought somebody in? Have they moved somebody around? What's going on there? What might be behind that? Any major products or service launches, strategic initiatives? Have they done any mergers and acquisitions recently? What's their position on sustainability? Are they opening up new markets, new products? What's their situation in terms of technology investments? What are they using? Are they using SAP? What was their experience of SAP? We're talking about external. What's their digital transformation pathway? What have their efforts been? Have they actually done a digital transformation that's been reported externally? What appear to be their pain points or risks flagged in job descriptions? Because they will have maybe on their website, they have jobs, or you can just do a search on maybe LinkedIn or on Indeed or any other aggregator and find out what seems to be the common theme here. So this is quite deep research. What's the culture and employer branding signals? What does it say on their website? How does that look like in the actual external information you're finding through their financial accounts, say? What are their growth plans or hiring patterns? Are they going up, down? What's happening? What industry trends might be affecting them right now or in the future? What are the challenges discussed by insiders? So you can go onto Glassdoor and find out all the nuts and bolts there, or on social media, maybe on X. There's lots of places. You're looking at 4 or 5 companies, whatever that number is. You can do some really, really deep research. This isn't under the pain of a deadline on an interview. This is you doing, you're basing yourself, grounding yourself in that organization, and you're forming a hypothesis about some of the big challenges this organization is facing. If, as you're going through this deep research, you get halfway through it or even towards the end of it, you feel, hang on, my motivation is being lost here, dump it. Add another. If you list of 5, what was the 6? Bring the 6 into play. Do the same task. Does it match the score? Does it keep you motivated? Does it keep you focused? Does it keep you engaged? Stay inspired. You have to complete the mission.
One of the most important things that you're talking about now is the need for job seekers to be more proactive, to take more responsibility in looking at what it is they want. And you know what? The incredible radical change here that happens as you do this as a job searcher is that you will become more motivated, more enthused about those organizations. And as you look at everything that they want, that they need, that they're looking for, you'll be able to identify individuals in key roles in that organization that you can begin to look at and work towards connecting with. Because all of this information is only relevant if you can apply it to the right people at the right time in the right conversations. This is an ongoing process, right? The job search strategy is a process that occurs over time. And the more information you have, the more research you do, and the more connections you can look at making, the more you will accelerate the ability to be able to connect with the right people, have the right conversations to arrive at the right outcomes.
Here's a third step, and this really relates to what Michael's just been talking about. You're now ready to engage with the organizations on a networking basis. They haven't got a job for you yet. Just hold the bus. So no longer are you just networking flimsily almost, turn up to events and hoping. You're actually executing a playbook. Your goals are very clear. Your job is to refine your insight. You've got a hypothesis, you're going to have a number of conversations, and you're going to piece together what input to that hypothesis are you learning? What is the language they're using to describe their opportunities, their problems, their challenges, the things that are keeping them up at night? You learn that language, learn what they're facing as individuals, as a business. You want to be building your name recognition inside those organizations. So the more people you talk to and obviously leave a positive impression, the more your name will rattle around inside that organization. And me and Michael worked together when I was trying to get into Walmart, frankly, and I ended up through a number of networking connections and conversations talking to their chief HR officer of their international branch, not just of Canada, of their international branch, because my name had rattled around in that organization. People had been writing in to advocate for me. I'd been networking like a crazy person. This happens. I'm living proof that it does happen. So it's important that you talk to as many people as you can. So perhaps if you're a university student, you may have people who have moved into that company from your school, from your university. college. Go and talk to them. Find out the inside track. Say, I'm really doing some really deep research on this company. It's a company I'd really love to work for. Tell me about your experience. Tell me a little bit about this. Your research will indicate some of the areas that you need to just gently prod on to gather a fuller picture. So when you go outside those people you know or should know, you're able to talk eloquently about those specific issues they're facing. And the third point of this is to drive referrals. So every person you talk to, maybe you've got this list of 4 or 5 companies, or whatever that number might be. Towards the end of the conversation, you say, look, is there anybody else in your company or others that I'm researching you think I should speak with? And you probably might want to end that with X, Y, and Z in mind. But you need to keep asking that question. Who else should I speak to around here to get a clearer understanding of maybe the languaging that's used, the opportunities, the challenges, the things that are keeping people up at night. And this should create a referrals loop because you're reinforcing, you're really super motivated about these limited number of companies and you're going very deep on these. If you can imagine that your conversations with them, how impressive they will be compared to somebody saying, hey, should we get together for virtual coffee? Let's have a chat. About what? Well, we just have a chat. That's a kind of an irrelevant conversation. And I hope that you won't have many of these irrelevant conversations if you're following this plan. Everything will be highly relevant and highly tuned to you achieving a position where you'll add value to one of these 4 or 5 companies that you're pursuing at great speed. Let's imagine that you've spoken to 20 or 30 people inside that organization. Obviously, it depends on the size of the organization. Some organizations are 20 or 30 people, but let's say there's 100 people in the organization and you've covered about 20, 30%. So your name is wrapped around in that organization. A team member might resign or underperforms, or the department might expand or is changing focus. The manager, who you may not have talked to already, turns to a team, because that's what they do. They turn to their team first before they run down the corridor to HR. They say, look, who do we know who could step in and do this job? And somebody says, what about Johnny? He's spoken to a bunch of us. He really gets what we're trying to do here. And you get invited in. There's no job ad. You won't find this job, not at this stage. There's no cattle market competition. You're not up against 500 other people and trying to get through the ATS machine and through the intern and through these multiple levels of interviews. You're just going to have a real conversation, low competition, and it'll be a high trust relationship that you're looking to form and will be formed because you'll be coming in having known a lot more about the companies you're pursuing than the average person that they might turn to. Say, if somebody says, yeah, who do we know? Oh, my brother, he's good. He might know a little bit about the company, but you'll have done some really deep research. You'll have talked to many different people in different parts of the business to really get a rounded impression of what makes this company tick right now. And then, of course, let's assume that the conversation moves forward and somewhere along the line, HR will be involved because they need to rubber stamp, yeah, this person's fine. We've done some background checks and whatever. So they step in, you go into their process. There'll be definitely 2 areas they will be asking. The first one is, why us? And you will return a very passionate or impassioned response to why us, more so than a person with 1, transferable skills, and 2, going through that, the other version of job search. And then at the end of the chat, they will say, do you have any questions for us? And you'll have a ton. You've done your research and you'll be exploring what does that research and research both inside the company and outside the company, your external research. You'll have a ton of questions to ask. And you know what? HR will see you as a very different individual to what they're used to. Because they're used to people like me turning up for a job and go, no, everything's fine. I don't need any more information. And this is a difficulty of those people who are doing the transferable skills. I can float around different companies. I just need to tell you some good stories and try and make some connection between what I've done here and what you need there. So you'll nail that conversation with HR. You'll have done the work, you know the landscape, the language, the issues that the company's facing, and you'll respond with compact, passionate precision. HR checks the accepted, you've gone through. They've been waiting for you as a candidate to come through, not just for this job. Remember, you're going to be broadly on your own, but generally in the population of people they're seeing, you will stand out like a sore thumb. So what makes you different? I think the important thing is you lead with real interest and not just sort of like, oh, yeah, I'd like to work in your company, generic ambition. You've tailored your LinkedIn, your resume, and your public profile to align with real company needs. And you may find that when you look at the 4 or 5 companies, they actually share some very similar needs, in which case it's you're not facing, no, my resume or my LinkedIn profile has to look in different ways. Actually, you'll find that most companies have issues with servicing their customers, profitability, perhaps being a bit inefficient on their overheads, struggling to get capital off the table and into position. These kind of things, you'll see a common thread as you work across the organization you're chasing after. You'll be able to connect those past experiences to the current situation that the target companies have. You won't have to resort to great storytelling skills. You'll be able to relay exactly how the things that they're facing relates to the things you've done in your background. You'll build trust through consistent presence and genuine curiosity. And you'll continue to sharpen your insights with every conversation you had inside a company or with people who know the company. You will be able to have those active conversations. And when you hear something slightly out of phase, you'll be able to explore it. Say, oh, what does that mean? Tell me a little bit more about that. You'll be genuinely curious to reinforce your hypothesis. You'll be trying to fill in the blanks in real time. And that's a very engaging conversation for somebody to be involved in. The work doesn't stop. Let's assuming that it moves forward into the offer, but this is critical, and I'm going to bring Michael back in shortly. You have to keep networking, both inside the organization you might be joining, also the companies you have been progressing as well. So it's important to continue to connect with people inside your new company, to stay visible within the other organizations that you've been targeting, and to keep those conversations alive post being hired. And the purpose of that is to stay sharp, as Michael alluded to earlier. Networking skills are a skill, and they need to be constantly practiced to be effective. You have to stay known and stay in the know. Those conversations you have with the companies that have been targeted, they will continue to develop, and you need to stay in touch with those companies and their developments and finding ways that you will remain valuable to those organizations in the future. And you need to keep your brand and your visibility vibrant in those organizations. So inside the organization, you have to say yes to difficult assignments. You have to ask for more responsibilities, and you have to stay visible to the key stakeholders. Your own deep research, both external and internal, will guide you as to who those stakeholders are, who could be very influential in your development. Promotions will follow. You have adopted a different strategy to the other guys who have been in the, let's call it the transferable skills club. They're passing through. When difficulties are encountered and like the CFO picks up his Excel spreadsheet with all the people's names and the salaries, and he talks to people in the business, saying, oh, who's this person? Oh, they're okay, but they've got transferable skills. They'll move on. What about this person? How about Johnny? Oh, he's brilliant. We can't do without him. He really adds a huge amount of value and is really connected inside this organization. This is why you must keep stakeholders, your networking connection inside the organization and those other target organizations. You must keep yourself top of their mind.
Gary, I think what you're talking about makes perfect sense. And in essence, once you clarify your focus and purpose and get out into the marketplace and start connecting with people, success in business and life is all about relationships. And the more you take it upon yourself to connect with people. Now, people think I need to be like a butterfly and go out there and pollinate everything. You have 5 to 6 to 7 networking events a week. That's just not the case. If you're in the right network, you'll meet the right people. The key is consistency and persistence in going back to those events and continuing to meet those people so that you can get to know them better, so that you can meet with them between meetings and find that ideal opportunity, in which case you'll have advocates on the inside who will support you, who will speak for you, and will facilitate the whole process. And that's where your networking essentially changes from a more floodlight approach, being out in the marketplace, to a spotlight approach within the organization, finding the right people who can have the impact in supporting your career and getting it going. I think what you're talking about here makes perfect sense. And I think this is an ongoing process. It's like a never-ending story. That once you become more intentional, and my definition of networking is the intentional process of creating and developing relationships from an initial contact to an ultimate outcome. And that evolves and changes as your career moves along. So excellent information, Gary. I think you're bang on.
Thank you very much, Michael. So just a final tip in this is you're not looking for a perfect role match. So for instance, if you're in the supply chain area, you might in your conversation say, look, I'm really brilliant at warehousing or transport or purchasing or cross-border movements or LTA, something like that, just as a effectively planting a seed. So you're really looking for kind of a fuzzy fit, because I often play this conversation in some of the conversations I've had, and that is this. So say if I go in there with some kind of rigid thought that I want to be a VP of supply chain, and somebody's sitting there, they've got this gap, they've called you in, you've had all this advocacy, you've arrived in this situation, and the guy said, well, we've got this thing over here. What is it exactly are you looking for? Oh, VP of supply chain. And he's got senior director of logistics, but it actually has the same components of what the job is called VP supply chain. He said, oh, that's a shame. Well, yeah, nice, Johnny. See you again soon. So you mustn't be that specific about the job title, because each company will have a range of roles and they will give them sometimes very similar job titles, but the job title isn't everything. It's what is it that they want you to do. That's got to be the focus. So going with a fuzzy fit, I just really want to do something pretty senior level in the warehouse or in the supply chain, if that's how you want to express it. But that vital conversation will happen. We'd like you to join us. But you, as a candidate or potential candidate, have only 2 questions. Do you want me to start today or tomorrow? And should I bring my stuff or your stuff be ready? So we don't get confused about anything else. We've got the employer, the decision maker to a point. We now need to move forward with some positive spirit. As I summarize, I'd like you to reflect, if you're in a current job search, if you're in transition, or even if you're in a company and looking to move on, or you're a student just about to leave a university, college, or a newcomer coming into Canada and thinking, this job search is taking longer than I thought it would do. I thought I would, like I did when I came to Canada and started job search, and I thought, oh, I'll get a job in no time flat. So the traditional approach tends to lead, and this is from conversations I've had with senior executives as well as ex-students, let's say, and newcomers, perhaps 1 or 2 interviews a month. Maybe you're hitting the screening and you're not getting beyond the screening. Maybe you get into the second round. The time between meaningful conversations feels like an eternity, because you're having conversations with people, perhaps other job searchers, or with me. I may be giving you a fairly hard time because I want you to get onto this plan. And weirdly, although you know this might be true, you don't want to sound desperate. But even if you try to kind of say, I'm not desperate, you might deny it in the moment, but you may come across as desperate, especially if it's like once a month, maybe once every 2 months, you have this excitement of talking to somebody potentially with a job. Months pass, activity stays flat. You begin chasing errant feedback, like you haven't got this, you haven't got that, you've got too much of this. It's confusing. and you keep hitting that easy apply just to feel at least active. You feel productive, but it really is just activity without a purpose. If you're in a transition and you're looking at your results for the last 6 months, you're still waiting, you're still hoping, you're still invisible. So against that, what we've been talking about during this conversation is the company first networking strategy. Be prepared for this. 2 to 3 real conversations per day, 5 days a week. You're focused, engaging, you're informed, you feel confident, you have great credibility, and you feel connected. People look forward to speaking with you. It's a positive outcome. Your name gains momentum. Opportunities find you. You feel gratitude. You feel self-belief returning to you. You're not chasing, you're choosing. You're not applying, you're being invited. This is a new playbook I'd like you to explore. This is how you take control of your job search and the rest of your career. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how you win. Michael, have you got any final few words?
I think you've wrapped this up in a nice bow. I think what you're talking about makes perfect sense. It's really the new strategy for a new economy. If there's one thing I would say to people, successful job search is really about two things. It's about process and progress. And I think you've done a great job in breaking that down, supplying a structure, and effectively showing participants how they can put into effect a radical new strategy that is different, that will dramatically drive their activity level, their progress, and their success. Thanks for allowing me to be part of it.
Excellent, Michael. Now, how do people find you? Lots of people have heard me over the last year, but they haven't necessarily heard you. How do they find you? How do they connect with you?
Simplest way to connect with me is go to my website, www.networkingforresults.com. Networkingforresults.com.
And you've got a very useful one-page weekly thing, which is just some reflections of the kind of concerns that people have with networking on a day-to-day basis. You grab that issue and just give it a one-page critique and some helpful advice coming out of that. I always read them. I always get something away, bring something out from that. And LinkedIn, do you want people to follow you?
No, absolutely. Just look me up, Michael J. Hughes, LinkedIn.com. I'm very active there and lots of information, lots of value for you to look at. Thanks, sir.
Good, excellent. So hopefully that conversation has been very helpful to you. I'd like you just to kind of reflect on the important messages there. You've got the traditional transferable skills, or you can take control of your job search. And I hope that you make good choices here. There's a lot at stake. One has a pattern of moving from company to company because you have to. One of them says, I will do that when I'm ready. Thanks for listening. As I say, I hope you got some benefit from this conversation. See you next time.